Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. As I'm recording this, we are in the first week of Story a Day September 2020. And if you haven't joined us yet, it is not too late. Today is day 5. You can come over to the blog, sign up there, and I'll send you prompts for the rest of the month. I seriously don't want you to think, oh, the month has started, it's too late. I'll join the next challenge that comes along. Because you could wait till November and join NaNoWriMo, or you could wait till January and do the whole New Year's resolution thing. Or you could sit down at your desk today and commit to write for the next 25 days, which is the rest of this month. I think it's 26 if you include today. And I wanted to go into a little detail today about why I think challenges like this work. Obviously, I say this over and over again, I don't think you have to write every day to be a writer. I certainly don't think you should try to write a story a day for any great length of time. It's exhausting, it's exhilarating, but it's kind of a silly challenge. And there are many good things about it. One of them is not that you will you'll become a better writer automatically. You do need to stop at some point and reflect upon what you've done. But I think that jumping in and doing a big push teaches you many things. It's also easy to stick to a challenge for a defined length of time. So I've been looking into this, why these challenges, this story a day and things like it work. And it's this concept of gamification. There's a guy called Charles Conrad who wrote a book in 1984 called The Game of Work. And at one point he asks why hobbies are much more preferable to work. I mean, people put in hours mastering their hobbies, buying all the stuff for their hobbies, mastering all of the little techniques, and they're not getting paid for it. And yet it doesn't ever seem to be a trial to get them to turn up for their knitting or their golf or their whittling or whatever it is that people love to do. Now, that was back in 1984. Think about it now. How much provocation does it take to get you to play one of those Twitch games on your phone? How much provocation does it get you to open up Facebook and scroll and pull down on the screen to refresh it? Not much. And then you find that hours might have scrolled by, whereas when you're doing something that feels more like work, you've got one eye on the clock the whole time and time can't pass fast enough. So Charles Conrad started looking into this. He's not the only person, but this is the example I've got for you today. And he came up with this theory, which has carried forward into gamification. And it's being used by people like Facebook to build addictive properties into their apps. And some of the things that make hobbies preferable to work are that a hobby or a game tends to have a more clearly defined set of goals than work does. So, for example, if you are playing a game of knockabout football with your friends, you know that you're going to play for X amount of time and there will be a winner, which is defined by the person on the team that has scored the most goals. As opposed to if you sit down and you're going to write, I'm going to become a writer, I'm going to write. Like, there's no defined goal there. Maybe you say, I'm going to write a novel. That's a very, very loosely defined goal. Or, if you're working, you go to work every day, Monday to Friday, and there's no clearly defined goal for you, except maybe not to get fired. Or maybe you've got a bunch of tasks you have to do, but it's rare unless you're an entrepreneur or you're, particularly motivated by your job. And when it feels more like a hobby, but usually that's because you've got a clearly defined goal. When I worked for a small startup, we were trying to get to the next round of angel investment funding. And when we got there, it was like, we need to get to the next round and we need to get X amount of clients. And because there were so few of us working for the company, my job impacted everything. And it had that kind of, that feeling of a hobby, of something I was doing because I could understand the clearly defined goal. The next thing that Conrad says that hobbies and games have over work is that they tend to have better scorekeeping and better scorecards. Think about it in your work. Maybe you get an annual review. Maybe you don't. And so games, you tend to know what's happening. Even, hobbies, you can tell when you've finished a thing or when you've got to a certain stage, when you've got to a level and you're moving on to the next level. Thinking about the games that I play on my phone, when I open up this particular game, I can't remember what it's called, but it's got, it's just one of those addictive little games. And it tells me when I get knocked out, it tells me if I've reached my best ever score or if I've reached my best ever level. And I'm like, oh, I got to level 7 before. Maybe I'll play again and maybe next time I'll get to level 8. So better scorekeeping and scorecards. Another thing that makes hobbies more fun than work. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about this, I am going to bring it all back round to how you can incorporate these things into your writing to make it feel more like fun again and less like work. One of them is stop using the word work to refer to your writing. But okay, back to Conrad. His third point was that with hobbies and games, you tend to get more frequent feedback. You can think about this in terms of video games, but you can also think about it in terms of sport or even arts and crafts. Like you can show it to someone, and even halfway through, and someone can go, oh, that's shaping up nicely, Whereas your work tends to not be quite so something that you can show to people or get feedback on. If you're playing sports, you get the applause of the crowd, that kind of thing. In terms of the next thing that he talked about is that with a hobby, you have a higher degree of personal choice of methods to do the thing. When it comes to work, you tend to be told what needs to be done, how this company likes to do it, etc. And there's a very real danger with the writing world that we take that mentality into it as well, and we treat it like work, and we say to people, how am I supposed to write a chapter, write a story, do revision, all of these things. So I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes too. And the other thing that he says, the difference between hobbies and games and work, is that you tend to get more consistent coaching. If you're on a sports team, you've got a coach who's telling you what you're doing. If you go to a personal trainer, you've got someone who's constantly giving you micro adjustments to your form. If you are in a knitting circle, you go to the store and you're doing something and you drop a stitch, and you can turn to somebody next to you and say, hey, I think I made a mistake. And you've got somebody there who can coach you and say, oh yeah, here's how you fix that, or I see what you did. We don't tend to have that so much with things that we regard as work. So my big overarching plea here is for you to relax and enjoy your writing again. Don't be in a rush to professionalize it. Whenever you tell anyone you're writing, they quickly say, oh, what have you published? Or when you tell someone you're writing a novel, or when you're writing a novel, you have that voice in your head which is like, oh, I've got to find a publisher, I've got to get this out there. And that turns it into a job. And very few of us are going to get fulfillment out of regarding our writing primarily as a job. And everyone I've interviewed who has taken their writing from something they did as an avocation to something that they do as their vocation is very clear-eyed about that. They don't regret it usually, but they say, yes, it is very different when you go from writing for yourself to writing for contracts and for other people. It's a different thing. It's a job. It's work. And I don't think we should rush into that. And one of the ways we can avoid rushing into that is by creating a sense of writing and our writing practice as a game. So thinking about Conrad's collection of definitions of how games and hobbies are different from work. Let's start with clearly defined goals. To make sure that your writing is not turning into work, give yourself some clearly defined goals. I would suggest take on a challenge like Story a Day September, Story a Day May, even, NaNoWriMo, one of these things that give you a clearly defined set of goals and a clearly defined timeline. So you can go all out, you could push, you could do this thing, and if it gets hard, you can say, it's not forever, it's just for this month, and you have a sense of when you have finished. Every day with Story a Day, right? You finish a story every day, so you know when you're done because you write the end, or I would say write the end at the end of every story, and then you're done. And then when you get to the end of the month, you've completed the month. You've got this sense that you have achieved a definite goal, and that's fun. And it gives you a boost, gives you some confidence. So Conrad's second point is better scorekeeping and scorecards. So in the grind of just saying something like, I want to be a writer, or I want to earn a paycheck, those things don't have a scorecard. With a challenge like Story a Day May, or Story a Day September rather, you can make a scorecard for yourself, in scorekeeping for yourself. I've got 30 little dots in the front of my journal, and I'm putting sparkly gold stars on them every day when I write my story. You could decide to do this with some kind of online tracker, some kind of app, but I would very, very highly recommend that you set some clearly defined goals for yourself and mark them. Keep track of them. It's very easy for us to sort of get into a rut, and when you're in that rut, there is a tendency not to celebrate what you have achieved, but to focus on what you've failed to achieve. So I suggest you create some kind of scorecard for your writing, and doing that during a challenge like Story a Day is the great training ground for that. Here's another thing that I do. I have two types of stickers. I have sparkly gold stars, because gold stars never lose their power over us, and I have little sparkly hearts. So if I miss a day, if it's just not happening one day, or if I forget to write a story that day, then I don't put a star in my journal, but I also don't leave a space. I give myself a little sparkly heart for forgiveness, for self-compassion. So I'm still keeping score. I can look at my scoreboard and I can see I wrote on 28 out of 30 days, but I don't feel bad about those gaping holes in my schedule, because I've designed the scorecard to be fun for me, to make me feel happy. And your scorecard or method of scorekeeping will be completely different, or you can copy that. It just, whatever works for you and motivates you more than it demotivates you. Turns this into a game, makes it fun. The third thing that Conrad talks about is frequent feedback. This is something that with writing we can end up getting really sort of stuck in a couple of different modes. One is you just write for yourself and you never show it to anyone. The other one is that you only write when you have a critique group or somebody to send it to, and you rely on their feedback all the time. So one of the things I would encourage you to do this month is write your stories. Don't show them to anyone, because you're going to be writing quick and dirty stories. You're just going to be working on this discipline of telling stories every day. You can show them to people if you want to, but I find that tends to stall me, because then I start worrying about whether the stories are good or not. So the kind of feedback that you can get during a challenge like this is simply to come to the blog and post and say, hey, I did my story today, and then interact with the other people who are there and say to them, hey, I saw that you wrote your story, Malcolm, well done. Great to hear from you, Wendy. I saw, good for you for writing that story. Frequent feedback doesn't have to mean you need to find somebody to read your stories. And it doesn't mean that you need to take a class or spend a lot of time on this. Just checking in every day in the blog comments at Story a Day can be really motivating. And then knowing that other people will start to expect to see your comment every day can also be very motivating. The next point that Conrad talks about is why hobbies and games are better or more preferable to work and easier to do, is that you have such a high degree of personal choice of methods. I mean, this is absolutely the perfect time to figure out what methods work best for you for writing. If you are committing to writing a story every day for a month, you're going to necessarily be writing in different ways. I mean, not every day of the week is the same. Some days you work, some days you don't, some days you have more people around, some days you don't, some days you sleep differently. You might have access to a different level of solitariness. That's not a word, but you might be alone some days and have more people around on other days. Your laptop might die, your pen might run out. This is the perfect time to try out lots of different ways of working and discover what it is that works best for you. I can tell you to sit down at a desk and use Scrivener and only write in third person, but I'm not your boss, right? This is the beauty of a challenge like this. You're your own boss. You have me as your sort of cheerleader or kind of accountability buddy, because I'm telling you to write every day and I'm asking you to check in, but you get to define how to make that happen. You get to teach yourself and learn about your preferences. I would highly recommend trying different things. Don't always sit at the same place. Unless that's absolutely working for you. If it starts to feel like a grind, pop your desk up on some bricks and stand up, or dictate into your phone or something different. So you get that degree of personal choice that gives you control over your working methods, and it's just more compelling than having somebody tell you what to do. The last point that Conrad makes is that hobbies are more preferable generally because you tend to have consistent coaching. This is for the higher level hobbyist tends to, you start out by yourself or you take a class or something, and the more you get into a thing, you tend to seek out both people to hang out with for the frequent feedback part and people to coach you. That's why you're listening to this podcast and all the other writing podcasts that I know are on your phone. That's why you read all those blogs. That's you're looking for not someone to tell you what to do, but someone to make you ask the questions. How do I work best? And I use the W word again, I shouldn't do that. How do I write best? How is this the most fun for me? What are the best methods for me to do this? And that's what a writing coach does for you. It's an informal thing. You're listening to the podcast, you're reading blogs. You may want at some point to get a formal relationship with a writing coach. But remember that you're not looking so much for a teacher as someone just to free you up to do the thing that you want to be doing anyway. This isn't work. It's the thing that you love to do. It's the thing that makes you happy. So it's not too late to jump into Story a Day September. Just go over to storyaday.org and fill in the form that will pop up, and I will send you prompts for the rest of the month. It is not too late to get that scorekeeping going. Make yourself a scorecard, a piece of paper, an app, whatever it is, with the remaining days of September on it, and start checking them off. You don't have to be perfect. You just, if you keep score of what you're doing, you can see what's working for you. Maybe weekends are the best time for you to write and Wednesdays are terrible. Maybe weekdays are the best days for you to write and weekends it just doesn't happen. But only if you keep track of it can you actually analyze it. For the feedback part, make a point to come over to the Story a Day blog every day and post and let people know that you've written today. Congratulate them on their writing today. This is something that it proves to you that you are part of something bigger than yourself, which, like, we don't write stories for ourselves, really. We write them to connect with other people. Writing our stories makes the world a better place because you're sharing your stories. So being part of that community really helps to give you that positive feedback. Figure out how you will work this month. Try different stuff. This will have benefits for the rest of your writing life. I mean, just spending an intense amount of time figuring out how to write every day, you will learn so much about yourself and about how to make it work. So put some effort into that. And on the coaching part, subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. Make sure that you are only following teachers and gurus and leaders and people who inspire you. Don't follow anyone who makes you feel bad about yourself. We don't need any more of that. So you're looking for inspiration and people who will not necessarily let you off the hook, but podcasts that will the ones that leave you energized and ready to get back to your writing, rather than the ones that leave you feeling deflated and kind of maybe envious and all that kind of stuff, right? So those are my points for you today. Get yourself some clearly defined goals, Story A Day. Get some better scorekeeping and scorecards, some frequent feedback, the Story A Day blog. Try out as many different ways of working as you can until you find the ones that really work for you. And it probably just won't be one, it'll be multiple ways of working. And make sure that you are filling yourself with good, encouraging words from people that inspire you. So, whether or not I have convinced you to jump into the Story A Day September challenge, or whether I've inspired you to think about some ways to spice up your challenge, make it more fun, gamify it, I'm going to encourage you to write at least one story this week. And why not use the prompt from today at the blog? This is a guest prompt from Mary Robinette Cowell, who is one of those writers who has taken the jump from writing purely as an avocation to writing as a vocation. She's an award-winning, Hugo-winning, Nebula-winning writer who writes short stories as well as novels. And so she gave us an opening sentence for today, which is, of the things that could go wrong while crocheting, opening a portal had seemed like a low probability. Now, if you don't care about fibre arts, you may substitute anything in there for the word crocheting. If it's woodworking, if it's golfing, then you've got of the things that could possibly go wrong while doing whatever hobby you've given your character. Opening a portal had seemed like a low probability. I'm really keen to see what you come up with. So come over to the blog today, leave a comment, let us know what you wrote, and tell me how you will gamify your Story A Day September efforts. That's what I have for you this week. Keep writing and have a great creative week. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and, of course, keep writing.